How far would you go for a child's future? What kind of sacrifices would you be willing to make, day after day, year after year, to see them achieve their most cherished dreams? Tell us, from the city or town where you are, if you've ever witnessed an act of parental love so profound that it redefines the meaning of devotion. The story you are about to hear is a tribute to that unwavering devotion, a tale of 20 years of silent struggle, hope, and the triumph of the human spirit in the face of the most extreme adversity. In the depths of the Guizhou Province mountains, where morning mist clings to the hillsides and life moves at the rhythm of the seasons, lived Wei Jian, a man with weathered hands and a noble heart. His greatest treasure was not the meager crops he coaxed from the stony earth, nor the humble hut that sheltered him, but his only daughter, Mei. From a very young age, Mei showed a lively intelligence and an insatiable curiosity. Her eyes sparkled with a special light when she learned something new, and Wei Jian saw in her the promise of a future he could never have. He knew that in that remote village, his little lark's wings could never fully spread. The local school barely offered the basics, and girls' destinies were usually early marriage and a life of fieldwork. But Wei Jian dreamed of something more for Mei. He dreamed of seeing her become someone important, someone who could change her own destiny and perhaps that of others. What dreams do you hold for your children, or what dreams did your parents have for you? It was one afternoon, while Mei, barely 7 years old, was reading an old newspaper that had reached the village with surprising fluency, that Wei Jian made the decision that would mark their lives forever. He saw the concentration on her childish face, the ease with which she deciphered the complex characters, and knew he had to do something, anything, for that talent to flourish. Quality education was only found in big cities, and that required money, much more than he could ever earn in the village. That night, under a star-studded sky that seemed indifferent to his anguish, Wei Jian devised a plan. A painful, extreme plan, but driven by limitless love. He would leave his home, his beloved Mei, in the care of an elderly aunt, and go to the coal mines in the distant north, a place rumored to have brutal work and constant dangers, but where the pay was significantly higher. He promised himself that every drop of his sweat, every ounce of his strength, would be for his daughter's education. Thus began Wei Jian's long and arduous sacrifice. 20 years. 20 years separated from his daughter, living in subhuman conditions. The early times were the hardest. The mine work was exhausting and dangerous. The air was thick with coal dust that embedded itself in his lungs, the machinery's noise was deafening, and the fear of a cave-in was a constant shadow. He lived in a dilapidated barracks with other miners, rough and desperate men like himself. His bed was a simple cot, his food scarce and monotonous. Every night, while his companions played cards or drank to forget, Wei Jian would sit in a corner, under the dim light of a bulb, and write letters to Mei. He told her of the pride he felt for her, urged her to study hard, painted a bright future for her, always omitting the details of his own misery. He kept a small photograph of Mei, worn by time and handling, and kissed it before sleeping, dreaming of the day she would become the woman he knew she could be. Can you imagine the loneliness and hardship of such a life, sustained only by the hope of a better future for someone you love? He sent almost his entire salary to Mei's aunt, keeping only the bare essentials to avoid starvation. There were winters when the cold chilled him to the bone, and he only had a thin blanket to cover himself. There were accidents in the mine, injured comrades, some who never came out again. Once, a beam fell on his leg, causing a deep wound. He treated it himself with makeshift remedies, so as not to lose workdays, so that the flow of money to Mei would not be interrupted. He never told his daughter anything about that incident, nor about the scars that lined his body, silent witnesses to his sacrifice. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, Mei grew and flourished. Thanks to the money her father sent punctually, she was able to attend the best schools. She was a dedicated and brilliant student, aware of the opportunity she had been given, though perhaps not of the exact price her father was paying. Wei Jian's letters were her greatest treasure, her connection to that distant father she barely remembered in person, but whose presence she felt in every book she opened, in every exam she passed. Life in the big city was a whirlwind of stimuli and challenges. The neon lights, the towering skyscrapers, the anonymous crowd. Everything was so different from her native village. There were moments of loneliness, of feeling small and insignificant in that gigantic city. There were moments of doubt, when the burden of expectations seemed too heavy. But then she would remember her father's words, his unwavering faith in her, and she would redouble her efforts. She decided to study medicine, one of the most demanding careers, driven by the desire to help others, to alleviate suffering, perhaps sensing the need to heal the wounds of a world that sometimes seemed so unfair. The years passed, marked by the relentless rhythm of Wei Jian's work and Mei's academic progress. The letters became less frequent as Mei immersed herself in her university studies, replaced by brief and expensive phone calls in which Wei Jian could barely articulate a word, overcome with emotion at hearing his daughter's voice, now a young woman. He was aging prematurely, his body suffering from years of abuse, but his spirit remained firm, fueled by news of Mei's successes. She, for her part, tried to understand the magnitude of her father's effort, although the distance and his self-imposed silence about his living conditions veiled the harsh reality. Is it possible for a child to fully comprehend their parents' sacrifices while still immersed in the path they have facilitated? The mystery for Mei was always how her father, a simple peasant, had managed to finance such an expensive education for so long. He always evaded her questions with vague answers about a good job and savings. She imagined hard work, yes, but not the daily brutality he faced. The full truth of his sacrifice remained a painful secret, jealously guarded by Wei Jian. Finally, after 20 long years of separation and sacrifice, the day arrived. Mei's graduation day. She was officially becoming a doctor. In the auditorium of the prestigious Shanghai Medical University, among hundreds of students and proud family members, Mei searched for a face in the crowd. She had invited her father, of course, sending him money for the trip, but she wasn't sure he could come. His health, in recent calls, sounded fragile. Then she saw him. At the back of the auditorium, sitting discreetly, was a small, stooped man with completely white hair and a face etched with deep wrinkles. He wore a borrowed suit that was too big for him, and his hands, those hands that had carried tons of coal, trembled slightly. It was Wei Jian. His eyes, however, shone with an intensity that illuminated his entire being. When Mei went on stage to receive her diploma, with honors, their eyes met. In that instant, time seemed to stop. All the pain, all the loneliness, all the sacrifices of 20 years converged into a pure, overwhelming emotion, infinite pride. Later, when they were alone, Mei, her degree now in hand, took her father's hands. For the first time, she noticed the scars, the deformity of some fingers, the roughness of punished skin. And then Wei Jian, in a soft voice, almost a whisper, began to tell her. Not everything. He could never tell her the full horror, but enough for her to understand. He told her about the mine, the cold, the hunger, the loneliness, the fear. And as he spoke, tears rolled down Mei's cheeks. Tears of gratitude, of pain for what he had endured, and of an understanding that tore at her soul. The extreme sacrifice suddenly took on a terrifying and sublime dimension. What do you feel when you hear about parental love of this magnitude? The catharsis was profound for both of them. For Wei Jian, seeing his daughter become a doctor, knowing his suffering had served such a noble purpose, was the culmination of his life. His body was exhausted, but his spirit was at peace. For Mei, the knowledge of her father's sacrifice was not a burden, but an inspiration, a driving force. She vowed she would use her profession to honor him, to help those who, like him, had suffered in silence. She decided that, after gaining experience, she would return to rural areas, perhaps even her own province, to offer medical care to those who needed it most. The end of this story is a song of hope and resilience. Mei's education, bought with her father's sweat and blood, became a beacon of light. Wei Jian, the humble miner, had performed the greatest act of love, and his daughter was ready to carry that legacy into the world. Their relationship, forged in distance and sacrifice, was cemented in a mutual understanding and respect that transcended words. This story reminds us that behind many successes are invisible sacrifices, and that a parent's love can move mountains, or in this case, extract them piece by piece from the bowels of the earth. It is a testament to the transformative power of education and the indestructible strength of family ties. Wei Jian's life was hard, extremely hard, but in his doctor-daughter's smile, he found the sweetest of rewards. His sacrifice was not in vain. It blossomed into a promise of healing and hope for many. What inspires you most about this story? The father's sacrifice or the daughter's fulfilled promise? We'd love to read your thoughts.